I'm good. No, I'm good.
Is anyone else?
Yeah.
Want to do it? Go for it. The photo was that.
It helps the colors and
What's the basis? Not too bad, yeah, pretty good.
It's getting weird.
My name is Tyler Sadler.
And I'm Max Farb.
We're both freshmen, undergrads at Stanford University. And for this Music 250A course, we designed this thing called Music in Motion. And it's a webcam-controlled, interactive, generative music sequencer. And the gist of the installation is that users come in and hold different colored balloons in front of a webcam, and we have a Max and jitter computer vision patch that interprets the visual motion of the balloons and turns that into sequence data.
Essentially, we've set up a series of chroma key filters that allow the computer to filter out everything except just the objects that are supposed to be tracked, and then can take that data, convert it into XY data, convert it into motion data, and then feed that into our generative sequencers.
This is an example of the balloons that I'm using. So the very first point in the signal chain is our Max patch, which takes the webcam visual input and starts processing it so that it can be utilized by Ableton Live, which is our main sound generation host. So right here, we're basically taking in a webcam input and we're splitting it off into multiple subpatchers. We've got a green, a red, a blue, and an orange subpatcher. And each one is nearly identical except for a couple different parameter tweaks. But basically the signal comes in and using chroma key we filter out specific colors for the given subpatcher. For the orange subpatcher, we've basically been able to filter out all colors except for the orange balloon, and we can do so by just clicking on the portion of the video feed that has a color we want to filter out.
Essentially, this part of the plugin comes from a set of tools called CV.JIT, which stands for computer vision for jitter. Essentially, it takes all the pixels of the object that's being tracked and averages out a center of mass, so to speak. And so using that, we can, for instance, turn off objects when there's no mass on screen, increase the distortion when there's a lot of mass on screen. We can
track XY values. We can also track like a sort of threshold of mass required to like turn on an instrument. So right now there's nothing on screen, and we basically have an if-then statement turning off our instrument patches when there isn't enough mass on screen, or there's like not a balloon on screen. Really. And then we also have this other CV patch called Presence. I think it's made by a company called Maxology. And it's basically taking the overall motion of the webcam.
It's part of the CV.JIT workflow. It's one of their built-in plugins.
Yeah. And it basically outputs a value for amount of movement on screen. And we have that running to all four instruments. We weren't able to run it on each individual filter just because of some processing issues. There wasn't a high enough resolution.
Also, the computer is just not fast enough to do it.
Right. So basically what that means is any sort of motion of any color will affect the motion-controlled parameters, or the movement, like output-controlled parameters of each instrument. And so we used MIDI CC outputs from Max to output our data from Max and into Ableton Live, where all of our instruments are hosted, where all of our effects are hosted, and all of our sequencing happens. And so we used this Max API plugin called Max API Control MiniCC.amxd, which takes incoming CC data and maps those values to different parameters inside of Live. And so that's how we were able to get data from Max controlling instrument parameters such as like filters, delay, reverb, distortion, and device on and off within Live.
The program running always makes sense musically, so to speak.
Right.
It's always running in time. It's always running in the same scale.
So we have like a rough template of what each instrument should play, but there's definitely a lot of
Probabilistic variance.
yes, there's a lot of Ableton MIDI effects that allow the instruments to move beyond just a preset sequence. And we've mapped some of those sequence control parameters in a way that hopefully makes sense intuitively to users. Like for most of our instruments, the X value on the backdrop controls note density. So as users move balloons towards one side of the screen, notes either become like sparser or denser, and
More notes get involved in the sequence, so to speak.
and also transposition happens. So instead of being confined to like an octave, notes might move 2 octaves up, a couple octaves down, and I think we've implemented it in a way that makes sense musically and intuitively, and one that users can figure out just by purely playing around with the hatch. Hopefully no instruction is necessary to have people have fun with our instrument.